Right now, somewhere inside your skull, a process is happening that will define how sharp your mind is 10 years from now, and you have almost no awareness it's even taking place. Some of it is helping you. Most of it, for most people, is quietly working against them. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which of 7 silent signs apply to you, and more importantly, what the research says actually reverses each one. Stay until the end because sign number 7 is the one almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most important one on this list. Here's what most people get wrong about brain aging. They think it's mostly genetic, something that either happens to you or it doesn't, but neuroscientists studying something called brain age have found the opposite. When they compare brain scans to actual birth certificates, the gap can be enormous. Some people in their 60s have the scan of someone 20 years younger. Some people barely out of their 20s already show patterns researchers associate with much older brains. The difference, in the vast majority of cases, isn't genetic. It's 7 everyday patterns so ordinary you've probably never once connected them to your brain. Let's start with the one that's happening to you literally every single night. Sign number 1, fragmented sleep, and I don't just mean short sleep. I mean sleep that's technically long enough on paper but constantly interrupted underneath the surface. Here's what's happening while you're unconscious. Deep in your brain, a system researchers call the glymphatic system switches on. Think of it as a nightly maintenance crew. It floods your brain tissue with fluid and physically washes away metabolic waste, including a protein called beta amyloid. The same protein researchers have found in unusually high concentrations in people with cognitive decline. This cleanup cycle depends almost entirely on deep, uninterrupted sleep. Wake up even briefly again and again, night after night, from a partner's phone light, from stress, from a bedroom that's too warm, and that cleaning crew never finishes the job. Picture two people. Both spend 8 hours in bed. One sleeps in long, unbroken stretches through several full cycles of deep and REM sleep. The other wakes up 14, 15 times a night, so briefly they don't even remember it by morning. On paper, their sleep looks identical. Inside their brain, it isn't even close. Researchers following people over years have linked this kind of fragmented sleep to faster shrinkage in the hippocampus, your brain's memory center. The fix isn't complicated, but it is specific. It's not about forcing 8 hours in bed. It's about protecting the conditions deep sleep actually needs: a cool, dark room, a consistent wake time even on weekends, and cutting off alcohol at least 3 hours before bed. Since alcohol is one of the most common and most overlooked disruptors of deep sleep architecture. Sign number 2, stress that never fully turns off. Not the stress of a hard day, the stress that's still humming quietly in the background at 11 at night, 3 weeks later. When cortisol, your primary stress hormone, stays elevated for months instead of hours, it doesn't just make you feel wired and tired. Over time, researchers have found it can actually change the physical structure of the hippocampus, thinning the very tissue responsible for forming new memories. This is part of why people under sustained pressure often describe something specific, not exhaustion exactly, but a kind of fog. Words that don't come as quickly. A conversation from yesterday that feels strangely distant. That fog isn't in your imagination, it is a biological signature. Here's the part that surprises people: the goal was never to eliminate stress. That's not how human brains are built, and chasing a stress-free life usually creates more stress trying to get there. What actually matters is whether your nervous system gets real recovery windows in between the pressure. A walk with your phone left behind. Slow, deliberate breathing for even 90 seconds. A wind-down ritual before bed that your brain learns to recognize as the signal that the day is actually over. Without those windows, cortisol never gets the chance to come back down, and neither does your mental clarity. Before we go further, let's clear up something almost everyone gets wrong. If you've ever downloaded a brain training app hoping it would protect your memory, I need to tell you what the research actually shows. Most studies on brain training games find something almost embarrassing. people get remarkably good at the specific game, and that skill almost never transfers to real-world memory or focus. You get better at the puzzle, not at your life. That doesn't mean mental challenge doesn't matter. It does. But the kind that actually changes your brain looks less like a game and more like genuine, effortful learning, a new language, a new instrument, a skill that makes you uncomfortable because you're bad at it at first. If it doesn't feel a little difficult, it's probably not doing much. Keep that in mind because it connects directly to sign number 6, sign number 3, blood sugar that spikes and crashes throughout the day. Your brain is a genuinely expensive organ to run. It uses roughly 20% of your body's total energy despite being a small fraction of your body weight, and nearly all of that energy comes from glucose. That's exactly why it's so sensitive to how stable your blood sugar actually is. Some researchers have started referring to insulin resistance as a factor closely tied to cognitive decline, in part because chronic spikes appear to promote inflammation that affects how efficiently neurons communicate. Think about what a typical spike and crash cycle looks like: a fast digesting breakfast on an empty stomach, a sharp rise, then an hour or two later, a crash that shows up as brain fog, irritability, a sudden, urgent craving for something sweet. That crash isn't a willpower failure. It's your brain running out of stable fuel. The fix that researchers keep coming back to is almost boringly simple. Never eat fast carbohydrates alone. Pair them with protein, fiber, or fat, and the same food produces a dramatically flatter, more stable glucose curve. It's not about cutting out carbohydrates. It's about never eating them in isolation. Sign number 4 is the one that gets almost no attention anywhere: untreated hearing loss. This one surprises people every time, so stay with me. Several long-term studies following thousands of people have found a consistent connection between unaddressed hearing decline and a faster rate of cognitive decline. The leading explanation isn't that hearing loss directly damages the brain. It's that a straining brain is a distracted brain. When sound arrives unclear, your brain has to work significantly harder just to decode it, and that extra effort pulls processing power away from memory formation and comprehension moment by moment, all day long. There's also a quieter mechanism at play. Hearing loss tends to shrink your world. Conversations in noisy restaurants get avoided. Phone calls get shorter. And social interaction, one of the most protective things for a brain, slowly declines without anyone quite noticing why. If you've caught yourself asking people to repeat themselves more than you used to, or turning the volume up higher than you remember needing, that's not just an inconvenience to work around. It's worth an actual hearing test. Sign number 5, not enough movement, and specifically, not enough of the kind that raises your heart rate. Exercise doesn't just affect your body. It triggers the release of a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which supports the growth of new neurons and new connections between them. Researchers following people over years have associated consistent aerobic activity with a measurably larger hippocampus and stronger memory performance, even when that exercise was moderate, not extreme. You don't need to become an athlete for this to work. The research consistently points to roughly 150 minutes a week of movement that elevates your heart rate, spread out however actually fits into your life. 3 brisk 30-minute walks and 1 longer weekend hike gets you there. The mistake most people make isn't laziness. It's all-or-nothing thinking, deciding that if you can't commit to an hour at the gym, it isn't worth doing at all. Your hippocampus doesn't care about intensity nearly as much as it cares about consistency. Sign number 6, and this is the one I mentioned earlier, connected directly to that brain training myth. Genuine social connection turns out to be one of the most demanding and most protective forms of mental exercise there is. Following a real conversation requires your brain to track tone, memory, timing, and meaning simultaneously, in real time with no pause button. It's a workout most people never think to count as one. Researchers studying loneliness, not simply being alone, but the subjective sense of disconnection have linked chronic loneliness to a meaningfully elevated risk of cognitive decline. In some studies on the same order as other well-established risk factors, the mechanism isn't fully settled, but the leading theories point to two things. Chronic loneliness tends to elevate stress hormones over time, and it removes exactly the kind of complex mental engagement that conversation naturally provides. This doesn't mean you need a packed social calendar. Researchers consistently find that the depth of your connections matters more than the number of them. One or two relationships where you can genuinely be understood appear to matter more for brain health than a wide circle of surface-level contacts. If your real conversations have quietly thinned out over the past year, that's worth noticing and worth rebuilding deliberately and now. Sign number 7, the one I promised you at the very beginning, and the one almost nobody connects to brain aging at all: chronic attention fragmentation. Every time you switch from one task to another, email to a text message, back to what you were actually working on, your brain doesn't switch instantly. There's a measurable lag researchers call attention residue, where part of your focus stays stuck on the previous task even after you've moved on. Do that dozens of times a day, every day, for years, and you're not just losing productivity in the moment. You may be training your brain out of its capacity for the kind of sustained, effortful focus that appears to build cognitive resilience over time, the same kind of focus, incidentally, that a real conversation or a genuinely difficult new skill demands. This is precisely why passive scrolling doesn't function as mental exercise, no matter how long you do it for. It asks almost nothing of your attention span, and it can quietly shrink your tolerance for anything that does. Here's a way to think about it. Your attention span may work something like a muscle. Constant fragmentation doesn't just fail to strengthen it. Over time, it can actively wear it down. The good news is that this appears to be trainable in both directions. Researchers have found that even short periods of single tasking, 20-1 minutes of one task, notifications off, one tab open, can begin rebuilding sustained focus within a matter of weeks. So here's everything, brought together into something you can actually use. 7 silent signs: fragmented sleep, chronic unresolved stress, unstable blood sugar, untreated hearing loss, insufficient movement, social isolation, and fragmented attention. None of them, on their own, will define how your brain ages. But together, quietly, day after day, they compound, the same way small habits always do in either direction. Here's a 7-day way to start. 1 sign, 1 day, 1 small shift. Day 1, protect your deep sleep. Cool room, consistent wake time, no alcohol within 3 hours of bed. Day 2, build in 1 real recovery window from stress. A phone-free walk, 90 seconds of slow breathing. Day 3, pair every fast carbohydrate with protein or fiber without exception. Day 4, book that hearing check you've been putting off, or simply pay closer attention to how often you ask people to repeat themselves. Day 5, take 1 brisk 30-minute walk, not for your body, for your hippocampus. Day 6, have 1 real, undistracted conversation with someone who actually matters to you, phones away, full attention. Day 7, spend just 20 minutes on a single task, notifications off, and notice how unfamiliar and how difficult that quiet actually feels at first. That difficulty is the point. It means something is finally being rebuilt. None of these 7 days require you to overhaul your entire life. They require you to notice, genuinely notice, patterns that have probably been running invisibly in the background for years. That noticing on its own is where almost everyone I've studied on this topic says real change actually begins. If this helped you see your own brain a little more clearly, subscribe. Every week, this channel breaks down exactly what's happening beneath the surface of your everyday habits. And in the comments, tell me, which of these 7 signs did you not expect to see on this list? I read every single one.